As we all know, Hollywood is never short of scandal, and Marilyn was at the center of most of it in the 1950s. There are a series of documents in this sale, dated from the end of 1954 to the beginning of 1955. And this was a really tumultuous time in Marilyn's life and career. And the story really begins with one of the most famous scenes in cinematic history. Marilyn Monroe standing over a subway grate with the wind blowing her skirt up, starring with Tom Ewell in The 7-Year Itch. And there's a little more to this scene than meets the eye. It was actually first staged as a publicity stunt. Marilyn was already a big star, and the Fox publicity department saw the potential in filming this live in front of an audience in New York City on location. So at the corner of Lexington and 52nd Street, Marilyn Monroe stood on a subway grate where a giant fan had been placed underneath, and it blew up her skirt. The scene was actually reshot at the studio several weeks later, but the publicity stunt had a major effect on her career. First and foremost, it really angered Joe DiMaggio, her husband, and it was only several weeks later that they actually divorced. And this sort of triggered a whole series of events, which are documented in the sale. So when filming was wrapped on 7-Year Itch, clearly one of her greatest films, her agent Charles Feldman threw her a big party at Romanoff's on November 4th, 1954. And this was a major Hollywood to-do. Everyone was there. But there was more going on here than meets the eye. Because in fact, Marilyn was extremely upset with her agent because for months and months and months, she'd been trying to get him to renegotiate her contract with Fox. What she wanted, besides the obvious, she wanted more money per film, she wanted artistic control. And this was unheard of in the studio system. No one got artistic control, particularly not a female actress. Her other problem with her agent Charles Feldman was that he was very close with Zanuck, the head of the studio, and she felt that he wasn't always acting in her best interests. So what makes Lot 86 so ironic is that even at the time of the party, Marilyn knew that she was going to fire Charles Feldman. And in fact, she'd already written the letter firing him and left it signed with her lawyer to send in when appropriate. And Lot 86 in the sale is that very letter. And what is amazing about it is that you can see that the date of the letter is filled in by a different typewriter than the text of the letter. And what happened was that after the party, a couple weeks later, and on December 11th, 1954, Marilyn gave her lawyer permission to send in the letter. And it was only soon after firing Charles Feldman that she then established her own production company with Milton Green. But this was only the start of the problems the studio had with Marilyn. They still needed her to finish up a few stills for 7-Year Itch, and they were demanding that she report for her next film, How to Be Very, Very Popular. Marilyn had no desire whatsoever to appear in that film. She had adamantly refused it. She felt she was bullied into it by Charles Feldman and Zanuck, and simply wasn't going to do it. And Lot 101 in the sale concerns her refusal to report to the studio. And one of the most amazing pieces in the lot is an unopened, sealed letter from the studio to Marilyn Monroe, stamped on the front of it, registered, return receipt, refused, special delivery. The studio couldn't get in touch with Marilyn. She was absolutely refusing to deal with them whatsoever. But this isn't exactly Al Capone's vault. We know what's inside the letter because of all the other material in the Fox Legal archives. It in fact was a letter to her demanding that she report to the studio to finish the stills for the 7-Year Itch and to begin production on How to Be Very, Very Popular. So how did Marilyn get out of reporting to the studio? Besides just refusing to answer her summons, she feigned ill. And there's some speculation that she in fact was ill, but mostly it's believed that she simply was feigning illness. And this was actually a common tactic used by stars to get out of films they didn't want to be in. And perhaps the most intriguing aspect, and really I suppose it's just a footnote on this whole ordeal, but in this very same time period, at the end of 1954 to the beginning of 1955, Marilyn had a run-in with the law that, as far as we could find, is totally unknown. And we know this by Lot 102 in the sale, which is a speedy note, a telegram to her by a man named Morris Brown, who's a bail bond broker in Illinois. And he had seen a little newspaper clipping that a judge in Hollywood had issued a bench warrant for Marilyn's arrest because she had received a ticket for driving without a driver's license and had never appeared in court as she was supposed to. Here Brown informs her that he has in fact fronted the bail money to the judge so that she wouldn't be arrested. What I love about this, besides the fact that this speedy note has all the carbons beneath it, it has a newspaper clipping taped to the front of it with the headline, "Marilyn Monroe, now a fugitive." As I mentioned earlier, feigning illness was a common tactic used by stars to get out of a film they didn't want to be in. And Lot 92 in the sale is a perfect example of that. Marlon Brando had been slated to film The Egyptian, and he was unhappy with the cast, he was unhappy with the screenplay, and he really didn't want to be in the film. So he had a psychiatrist declare him mentally incapacitated to be in the film in order to get out of his contract. But Fox didn't believe him. So what's in Lot 92 in the sale are several internal memos detailing his trying to get out of the film and essentially questioning whether or not the psychiatrist was legally declaring him mentally incapacitated or was doing so just as a favor to Brando so that Brando could get out of the contract. In the end, he did get out of the contract, and Victor Mature appeared in the film. What's in this lot are several letters and several telegrams relating to this event, and one of them, dated February 3rd, 1954, 20th Century Fox questions Dr. Marilyn. The patient advised me that he has been under your care for 3.5 years, and as a layman, it appears curious to me that you would indicate his recovery would occur at approximately the same date we contemplate finishing photography on the motion picture, in which the patient has agreed and contracted to appear. So in other words, Marilyn not only declared him mentally incapacitated, but said he would miraculously be better as soon as production would be over. One of the biggest and long-running scandals in Hollywood history is the feud between Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. The origins have been debated, but lots 144 through 147 show the latter ends of the feud. Both Joan Crawford and Bette Davis had signed with Fox to produce a movie called Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and it was seen as a quote-unquote sequel to their joint appearance in an earlier film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. What I love about these documents is they reflect the feud. In the contracts, they had to approve the other appearing in the film, and one contract even goes so far as to say that the publicity tours for the film, that they would appear separately, that they wouldn't be on a joint tour, that they would do so completely separate from one another. But even going to these lengths in the contract didn't help the situation. It's basically common knowledge that Bette Davis made Joan Crawford's life a living hell on set. One of my favorite stories about the early production on this film was that Joan Crawford was married to the president of Pepsi Cola, and Bette Davis, just to needle her, had Coke machines installed on set. In any event, just like Marilyn Monroe and Marlon Brando, Joan Crawford too feigned an illness to get out of production on this film, and was ultimately replaced by Olivia de Havilland. Lot 147 is the telegram from Robert Aldrich to Bette Davis informing her that shooting has been suspended because of Joan Crawford's quote-unquote illness. The lot also includes an earlier telegram, or really a carbon copy of the original telegram, from Bette Davis to the General Artists Corporation, talking about the other casting in the film, and she was incredibly upset that Barbara Stanwyck had been cast in the film as Jewel. The telegram reads, "Also feel an actress of the stature of Stanwyck as Jewel an insult to both Crawford and me, like old home week with the old girls from the Warner lot." She then goes on to say that she wouldn't want Stanwyck, but she would approve of Mary Astor. And of course, in the final version of the film, it was Mary Astor who got the part. Often, scandals in Hollywood are centered around drugs and alcohol. And the last two lots in the sale, lots 153 and 154, concern one of the biggest stars and unfortunately one of the most tragic stories in Hollywood, the end of the career of Judy Garland. Lot 153 is a contract for Judy Garland to play the role of Helen Lawson in Valley of the Dolls. Valley of the Dolls was the best-selling novel written by Jacqueline Suzanne, and the story was about three young women trying to make it as actresses, and really centers around one character named Neely O'Hara, who was played in the film by Patty Duke, who makes it and gets to Hollywood, and her career falls apart because of her dependency on prescription drugs. While Judy Garland obviously wasn't playing that role, she was playing a role in the film as sort of an elder actress starring opposite Neely O'Hara in a role that was really modeled after Ethel Merman. Well, shooting didn't go so well. Producers quickly realized that Judy Garland was in no shape to appear on film. And lot 154 in the sale is a letter signed by Judy Garland agreeing to the terms of her termination from the film. And of course, the reasons for the termination were her own dependencies on drugs and alcohol. Her contract to be in Valley of the Dolls was in fact her last contract for a Hollywood film.